Welcome to Thriller Recaps. Today, I am explaining the movie, The Unforgivable, explaining every scene as it happens. Watch till the end, and please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy this. Vince Cross arrived at the prison to process Ruth Slater's release on her scheduled date. On their way to the car, he walked her through the rules she had to follow: no relations with ex-convicts, no drugs, alcohol, or weapons, and no contact with the victim's family. Catherine was driving when she received a voicemail from her sister, urging her to return their mom's call because she was worried. The message triggered some flashbacks, causing Catherine to zone out and inadvertently collide with another car. Vince handed Ruth a card from one of his friends who offered fish packing jobs for his clients. Ruth declined, insisting she already had a carpentry job, but Vince persuaded her to take it. He took her to a lodging house and informed her they would meet every Tuesday at 5 a.m. The housekeeper showed Ruth to her bunk in a room shared with 3 others and explained the house rules. The victim's son, Keith, followed them from the prison to the lodge, then went to meet his brother at work. He told his brother about Ruth's release and suggested they take revenge for their father's death, but his brother advised against it, reminding him he now had a child to consider. Later that night, Ruth received a threatening phone call. When she returned to her room, she found another resident going through her belongings. She confronted the resident and forced her out. Meanwhile, Catherine was admitted to the hospital, surrounded by her family. She had suffered a broken rib, a broken shoulder, and a concussion. Her dad suggested she stay with them until she recovered. Her mom worried that Catherine's accident might be connected to Ruth's release on the same day. Her dad, however, believed Ruth's letter hadn't been received and dismissed the incident as a coincidence. Ruth remembered the time a group of men came to evict them from their home. She adamantly refused to leave and threatened to shoot anyone who entered. Her little sister, Catherine, sat in fear. A police officer arrived and tried to coax Ruth outside, offering her and Catherine a room at his house, but Ruth refused. The men moved closer, prompting the officer to slip inside through the back door. Ruth attempted to return to her carpentry job, only to find it was no longer available. She then pursued the fish packing job. The next day, she visited a cyber cafe to look up information about her sister but found nothing. She later discovered that their house had already been sold. Taking a bus, Ruth arrived at the house. The new owner's wife, Liz, informed her husband, John, that there was a woman in their yard. John went outside to see who it was. Ruth explained that she had helped renovate the house years ago and was checking to see what had been done with it since. John invited her inside to take a closer look, triggering memories of their time living there. Liz asked if Ruth knew the former occupants because they had found baby shoes in the wall. Ruth replied that she did not. She had a flashback to shooting the officer, feeling unsettled. She said goodbye to John and Liz, but John offered to drive her to the bus station. When they arrived at the bus station, Ruth asked John if he was a lawyer. He confirmed that he was, so she asked if he could help with family issues. John, sensing something more, told her he knew she had been lying and asked what she was up to. Ruth confessed that she and her sister had lived in their new home after their parents died. However, she ended up in the system, and her sister was put up for adoption. Despite writing to her sister during that time, she never received a reply, so now she wanted to find her. John felt sympathy for Ruth, gave her his business card, and promised to do his best to help her. Meanwhile, Catherine's parents told her to call if she needed anything, as they were going out. Catherine's sister heard her awake in the night after their parents left, and asked if she was still having nightmares. Catherine admitted that she was and that a woman was really close to her, but she couldn't remember who she was. Her sister asked if she would like to look into her past, but Catherine bluntly refused. One day, Ruth was walking down the street when she heard the sound of saws in a building. She went inside and asked if they needed extra hands. The man told her it was an NGO, so they didn't need anyone yet. Ruth pointed out some errors in the woodwork that had already been done and suggested how they could have avoided them, so the man employed her. Vince came to see Ruth and asked if she had told her employer that she was an ex-convict. She replied that it wasn't necessary, so he reminded her that she had been convicted of murder. Ruth went for her shift at the fish factory, and after her shift, one of her colleagues offered her a ride home. He dropped her off at her second job, and she went in to continue her work. She tried to call John, but it kept going to voicemail because he had found out about her past, how she had killed a cop. Keith was outside the building, watching her. Ruth had a flashback of the cops coming to arrest her in a restaurant when she was with her sister. Then she heard someone shout her name in the building. She grabbed the saw and went to check who it was. She was about to hit him when she realized it was her colleague. He apologized and told her he had brought her donuts, and a coat because the one she was wearing was not doing the job. Then he left. Ruth sent another message to John, explaining why she hadn't given him the details of her arrest. She begged him to help her because she just wanted to know if her sister was okay. She said she wouldn't want to take her from her new parents after 20 years. Keith's brother was having a birthday party for his daughter. A man asked him if Keith had told him about Ruth and how she was always alone in a certain location most of the time. When workers came to continue their work on John and Liz's new home, Liz asked them if the former occupant had any relatives named Ruth. But he replied that it was the daughter of the original owner of the house. And when they tried to evict them from the house after their dad committed suicide, she shot a cop. Keith came out to meet his brother. His brother confronted him about stalking Ruth. Keith replied that she was the cause of everything that had happened to them since their dad died, and she was out freely living a normal life, so he felt he had to do something about it. When John came home with the boys, Liz confronted him about Ruth. He apologized for not telling her when he found out about Ruth. Liz then told him to keep Ruth away from their home. Keith's brother went to their house to check on their sick mother and saw pictures of his father hanging on the wall. A truck of wood arrived for Ruth. She complained that they were late while packing them inside. Keith's brother approached the truck as if he were one of the people who came to deliver it. She told him to help her with the packing, and he agreed. He scanned the room when they got inside and found out that she was constructing a lodge for the homeless and other things. The wood truck left, and she realized that he was not with them. She told him that she was heading out, and he left. She picked up her phone and left, but he was still in the building. He went back upstairs and found her new letter to Catherine telling her to contact her whenever she was ready, and he also found her picture, so he snapped both. Ruth ran to her meeting center. Vince frowned at her lateness and asked why she got a lawyer. He told her that she didn't have the right to reach out to Catherine, as she was better off without her. Catherine's parents received a letter from an attorney on behalf of Ruth Slater. The father wanted to ignore the letter, but the mother insisted they meet with her, suggesting she might be able to help with Catherine since she only asked to meet with them, not Catherine. Catherine's sister overheard their conversation. Keith's brother Steve told Keith that he finally understood what he had been trying to tell him. Steve's plan was to do the same thing to Ruth that she did to their father. Ruth went out to eat with her colleague Blake. She told him that she went to prison for killing a cop. He told her that he couldn't deal with her anymore, so she left. The next day at the fish factory, a woman attacked Ruth, calling her a murderer and stating that her dad was a cop. She threatened to come for her. Ruth got up, picked up her phone from the water, washed out the blood from her mouth, and worked quietly. Blake tried to talk to her after work, but she didn't want to hear it. Ruth met up with Vince in a park. He told her that her lawyer had called, and the parents agreed to meet. He advised her to make good use of the life she had now. Catherine's parents took her to her music rehearsal venue. Her sister went back home while they were out searching for letters from the lady their parents were talking about the previous day. She found the latest one, and then went to the basement to look for more. Catherine's parents arrived at the lawyer's office to meet with Ruth. The father told Ruth that Catherine had lost her memories from the trauma of the killing and couldn't remember anything before they adopted her, so it wouldn't be helpful to meet her after all these years. Ruth told them that their mom died while giving birth to her, so she had raised her since she was a baby. She asked if Catherine was now sleeping well because she didn't sleep well back then. The father got defensive and said that she could blame herself for their separation and Catherine's trauma. Ruth asked if they had received her letters, and she intentionally kept her away from her sister. When they didn't respond, she got angry and yelled at them, accusing them of intentionally separating her from her sister. The father took his wife out, but the mother told Ruth that she hadn't burned her letters, and then they left. Catherine's sister, Emily, found and read all the letters Ruth sent. Ruth went back home and tried to continue her carpentry work, but she was upset and threw everything around in the room. At the fish factory, Blake came up to her. He told her that he was also an ex-convict and was shocked when she told him about her past. He had just wanted to confide his feelings in someone, but it got out of hand. On her way back home, she got a call from Emily. She told her she had read all her letters, and Ruth immediately thought it was Catherine and asked to meet up. Steve was following Ruth. He tried to reach Keith, but he couldn't. Ruth went to their meeting location. Emily arrived a while later and sat beside her. Ruth thought she was just a random kid, so she asked if she had skipped school. When Emily replied positively, Ruth told her that she wished she had stayed in school during her time, but her sister was way younger than her, so she had to stay at home with her sister. She said she wished she knew how Catherine was now. Emily replied that she loves playing the piano and is good at it. She told her Catherine was having her rehearsal at a venue by 4, then she left. Steve followed Emily until she got home, then he went back. Emily called John and told him about the opportunity to see Catherine. When Steve got home, he saw Keith having sex with his wife. He became furious and hit Keith repeatedly, then barged out of the house. Steve went to his mother's house, took a gun from the closet, and left the room. Ruth went to John's office, but he was not there, so she went to his house. He wasn't around either, so she told his boys to get their mom. Liz didn't want her in their house, so she told her to leave. But Ruth begged, saying she just wanted to know if it was okay for her to go see Catherine alone. Liz told her that she lost Catherine because of the bad choices Ruth made. Ruth replied that she had already paid for it, and she did it for her sister, who was only 5. Liz realized something and asked Ruth what had happened exactly. Ruth remembered that while she was threatening the men not to come in on the phone, Catherine took the gun and shot the cop who had just come in from the top of the stairs, then she passed out. Liz offered to take Ruth to the venue. On their way, Ruth remembered carrying Catherine out of the house and threatening the other men with the gun. She took Catherine to a restaurant and got her food, but when she talked to her about what she did, Catherine couldn't remember. Then she told her she had to go somewhere and left her in the restaurant when the cops came. When they got to the venue, Ruth got a call from Steve saying he had abducted Catherine and he would kill her if she didn't come alone. She begged Liz to take her to the location. When they got there, she told Liz that someone had Catherine. Liz got back into the car and made a call while Ruth went inside. Steve gave her directions to the room where he was holding someone, then threatened her to come in when she reached the door. Ruth entered and saw that he had tied down Emily, not Catherine. Steve threatened her to get on her knees and watch him kill her sister in her presence. Meanwhile, Catherine got on stage for her rehearsal and started playing. Ruth told Steve that his dad had talked about him before he died that day and that he was a kind man. Then she apologized for taking him away from him. He got angry and aimed the gun at her head. She told him that killing her wouldn't take away the pain, and it would only take him away from everything he ever loved, like it did to her. Steve took the gun off her head, then fell to the ground. Liz went to Emily, untied her, and moved behind her. Cops arrived at the scene. Ruth let Emily out of the room, and she also stepped outside while Steve watched her. The cops put her face on the ground. They then went in and arrested Steve. While Catherine was playing the piano, she remembered Ruth's face when she said goodbye at the restaurant years ago. Vince came to pick up Ruth and asked if she was okay. Ruth walked to the car with Vince. Then she saw Catherine by the ambulance, attending to Emily. Catherine saw her, walked up to her, and hugged her. Then she remembered all the times they spent together. Subscribe for more daily videos. Your support, likes, shares, and subscriptions mean a lot. See you in the next video.